stop, take a breath. The reality is we don't know how bad it is. Let's talk about it. A new memo has come out from the FCC announcing that DJI has been added to the FCC's covered list. This is a move that we've seen coming, and in fact, I have said in the past that it was inevitable. But the memo contained additional prohibitions on foreign-made FPV drones and FPV components, and this is leading some people to freak out and wonder whether it means that the FPV components that we hobbyists have used to build FPV drones will be unavailable to us. And that is what I want to dig into in this video. I think that the situation could be very, very bad if everything went the worst way it could possibly go. I think that things usually don't go the worst way that they could possibly go, although that's sort of cold comfort. And I think that, as usual with this administration, the real problem is the ambiguity, uncertainty, and we're going to try to make sense of it as best we can. This document is what has started all the fervor, and it's not very long. You can read it. I'll link it in the video description below, but I'm going to try and drill down to the salient parts. As expected, DJI and Autel have been added to the FCC's covered list. The FCC's covered list is a list that the FCC maintains of entities that are not allowed to get FCC certification. What that means is that they cannot release devices in the United States that transmit on radio frequencies, which is basically every device these days, although not every device, as we'll talk about later in the video. This happened as a result of the 2025 National Defense Authorization Act, which was passed back in November of 2024, and it said that in a year, if no one does an audit of DJI and Autel and says that they're safe, which of course no one did. If no one did that, then they would be added to the covered list. So this is something we've seen coming. But there's additional language in here that says that uncrewed aircraft systems, UAS, and UAS critical components produced in foreign countries are also added to the covered list. What does that mean? What is a UAS? Well, we know the definition of a UAS per other government regulations. What's a UAS critical component? They define that at the bottom. UAS critical components means these things: data transmission devices, communication systems, flight controllers, ground control stations, UAS controllers, navigation systems, batteries, motors, etc. And what this seems to say on its surface is that any foreign-made drone component is now on the covered list. Now, I want to start by pointing out that the covered list is not a blanket ban. The covered list says that you cannot get FCC certification, and the FCC treats that as a blanket ban. In this fact sheet about the memo, the FCC says new devices on the covered list, such as foreign-made drones, are prohibited from receiving FCC authorization and are therefore prohibited from being imported for use or sale in the United States. But not all devices need FCC certification. Motors don't need FCC certification. Batteries don't need FCC certification. They do not transmit radio frequencies, and so it's pretty weird that the FCC even mentioned them. This is a case where it's impossible to conclude what the intent of the administration is in terms of how they will actually implement this, because we've seen the administration do things that cause experts to say, that's illegal, you can't do that, or that's not in the scope of that government body. And sometimes the administration does them anyway, and sometimes they get sued and they back down, and sometimes they don't. So the fact that the FCC isn't supposed to regulate motors, and therefore saying, oh, they can't get FCC certification, so they can't be imported, shouldn't mean that they can't be imported. Doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be stopped from being imported. And it doesn't necessarily mean that stores might hesitate to import those things on the possibility that the store might get in trouble. Again, the uncertainty is really the freaking kicker here, as with so many things in this administration. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out. But a strict reading of the actual letter of the law should indicate that anything that doesn't need an FCC certificate isn't affected by this, even though those words are in the document. The other thing I want to point out here is that many of the things we use in the FPV hobby that should technically have FCC certifications don't. Like Express LRS receivers. Express LRS receivers should have FCC certifications in order to transmit and be imported in the United States. Radiomaster is the only manufacturer of Express LRS receivers who actually bothers to go get FCC certification. Everybody else just imports their receivers and sells them and uses them, and no one notices. Technically, many of the things we currently use shouldn't be legal to import, and no one cares. And I think a likely outcome going forward, at least for the foreseeable future, is that no one will continue to care, and we will still be able to import all of these things. We might see manufacturers like Radiomaster, who have been trying to play by the rules, start flying under the radar, because apparently that's just what it's going to take. I don't know. And the other thing that stands out about this to me is the reference to foreign countries. It's very interesting because so far the key phrase for this kind of thing has been the National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA. And the NDAA prohibits the use of products made in certain hostile countries, China being first and foremost. And many manufacturers of drone-related components have moved their manufacturing out of China to other countries, like HD0 makes their NDAA goggles and video transmitter in Thailand, for example. Immersion RC manufactures in Croatia, which is a European Union country and is not an NDAA country. And the idea is that they can say, yes, we're spending more for manufacturing, but we're not manufacturing in China. See, aren't we good boys? Now the U.S. government will not only allow us to import these things, but allow us to sell these things to the military. And now they seem to be saying that you can't import foreign-made stuff. Well, that would mean all of these foreign NDAA countries, these manufacturers are now screwed. And it's really weird, although not out of character for this administration, to take a long-standing policy that industry has moved to comply with. The federal government, the military, they're saying, fine, we're going to buy NDAA stuff. Companies like Unusual Machines are making, Neros are making NDAA hardware. They're spending more to do it, but at least we can sell to the U.S. government. And now, suddenly, oh no, it's not NDAA, it's not Blue UAS, it's foreign made. Anything foreign made is now prohibited. Is that the government's policy? And all these companies that have been spending all this money to try to comply, now the goalpost has been moved again. Or has it? We don't frickin' know. I think it's inevitable that there will be lawsuits over this. If this is implemented as intended, as worded, then a lot of companies who have spent a lot of money to try to comply with the previous policy will now be out that money, and they're going to sue. I think that as far as hobbyists go, we will not notice any difference. Whether that means that stores like Get FPV, maybe, and I've asked these companies for statement, but it's still too early. They haven't replied. I'm sure they're talking to their lawyers, so that's not going to be in this video. But like theoretically, I could see a company like Get FPV, Race Day Quads, or Pyrodrone saying, we're not going to risk trying to import this stuff if theoretically it might be prohibited and we might get in trouble. Like they might be cautious about that. They might not. They may say, oh, well, we're going to import it until somebody tells us otherwise. But even if that were to happen, that just means that hobbyists would be ordering from AliExpress instead of ordering from Get FPV. And I suspect that that stuff will still continue to get in. The number one place I think this is going to be felt is in drones. And I think that's the actual intent here, although they definitely also focus on components. I think the focus on components is potentially in large part because they don't want to see components being brought in and then assembled into drones and saying, see, we're not importing drones, we're importing components. Companies, Chinese companies like the new A1, the 360-degree drone, that's a Chinese company. That drone is in because it already has certification, but the subsequent one would not be able to get certification. And that's the kind of thing that is going to be very easy to catch at the border, to catch at customs, and to then say that can't come in. So I think that foreign manufacturers of ready-made drones like DJI, Autel, and anybody else are that's it. We're not going to get access to those things unless or until this changes. But as far as hobbyists building FPV drones out of standalone components, I think that is unlikely to be affected for the foreseeable future, unless this administration is way more aggressive than you would think. And anyway, like, how are you even going to catch that stuff? I don't think it's going to happen. I think that if I was a USA-based drone manufacturer, I would see this in a very positive light. I would see this as a sign that the administration is going to support my business and create a very friendly business environment. And if I was a foreign manufacturer, even a foreign manufacturer making stuff for the government, I would be pretty annoyed right now, and I would be ramping up the lawyers. That's my take. We shall see how it plays out. It's hard to make predictions, but I think this is the most sort of realistic and sober prediction I could make, and we'll see how it actually plays out in the end.